The world is turned upside down, it surely must be true. The way that things are running now proves that to me and you. We're up against it now, there's no use to raise a row. But of all the times I've ever seen, we're sure up against it now. Since the highways come, they've taxed the farmer down. His friends, they cannot travel, and he has to walk to town. We're up against it now, there's no use to raise a row. But of all the times I've ever seen, we're sure up against it now. Hello again, everybody. Good to see y'all again. I know it's been a while since I posted a video. I've been going through some shit. To sum it up, a whole lot of stuff. Spiritually and just a lot of, you know, real life shit. But mostly spiritually. It's all good stuff. And I'll go more into that in my next banjo video. But today, we're gonna go over how to build a raised planter box. Or at least the way I did. You can build however you want, but I built 5 of these boxes that like to hug my deck, and there's going to be a lot of crops this year. By the time this video is up, I'll already have had these, you know, planted and such. But basically, these are cedar boxes, 6 feet long by 24 inches wide, and the boxes themselves go down to 20 inches. But they're on legs, so these are raised up to 3 feet. But enough of that mumbo jumbo. Let's get right to the tutorial, and then afterwards I'll maybe play you a little tune at the end. We'll see, but stay tuned. Okay, now we got our 6 legs, 2 for the middle and 4 for the corners. And what we're going to do is notch each and every one of them out so that the outside edge is only an inch thick when it surrounds the box. The corners are obviously going to be a little more of a headache than the middle, because the middle you just make 2 cuts and then you have a notched out 4x4, but the corners are going to be different because it not only needs to sit on top of the 4x4 just like the 2 middle ones, but I also need the outside corners of the 4x4 to wrap around the box. So it's not as simple as making 2 cuts, because if you do, then you lose that 45-degree corner. This part right here. We want to keep this half and that half, but everything here needs to go so that it'll sit comfortably in the corner of this 4x4 post, and it'll sit down on top of the 4x4 below, just like in the middle. Because in the middle you just make 1 cut here and 1 cut there, as I said, but I'll show you all how I do that. Okay, so our 4x4s are 3.5 inches, and if I want to notch the 4x4s out just enough to where we still have an inch left over after making that notch, then we gotta set our blade on the table saw to 2.5. So, because an inch minus 3.5 is 2.5, right? And if you don't have a table saw, you could use a skill saw with a straight edge or something perfectly straight, and then clamp that on the board so that would be used as a saw guide. And then if you look over here, you see that piece of wood just sitting at the edge of the table saw fence? I have that screwed into place, and that's just a guide. That's a guide, a stopper guide, so when I run my board all the way through, it doesn't go beyond this point. And the reason for that is these boxes are going to be 20 inches deep, but they're gonna be raised off the ground. So the top of them is gonna be at 3 feet when all said and done. But the box itself only goes down 20 inches, so once you make sure your table saw blade is set up where it needs to be, just run a few test pieces of scrap. Yeah, a couple test pieces of scrap, and adjust the blade or this if you have to until you've found the exact spot. Because now I have it set up to where every board that bumps into that will end up right at 20 inches. Also important to note, if you're trying to achieve that 1 inch left over from the notch, obviously set this up properly. Now when you set this up, you want the inch mark to be on the right side of the blade. If this fence was on the opposite end, then the same would be said for the 1 inch mark. You'd want it to be on this side of the blade, but since the fence is here, you want that inch to land right next to the tooth, just like that. And once you rip one board, you'll have to flip that board over to do the other side for the corners anyway. Even for all the boards. But when you do that, you gotta move this fence a little that way, because now you're flipping the board on the opposite end, so keeping this here wouldn't do anything. You would just be cutting a whole new notch, and we don't want that. So let me get everything set up here and I'll show you exactly what I'm talking about. Okay, so now that we've ran our scrap through, everything is where it should be. From the fence to the blade is a good inch, and we raised this just enough to where when you run it through, it's exactly 2.5 inches worth of cutting. So now a whole inch is left, which means when we make our 2 notch cuts, we should have almost a perfect 45-degree angle of a solid inch from one side to the other, you know, to the corner and out. So I'm gonna run one piece through and show you exactly what it looks like. Alright, you see my cut, and now you see that pencil line. That's where we want to cut. Just a general idea so we don't cut the wrong side. And how we're going to do this, because now we have to move our fence. Well, since we also want an inch going this way as well as this way, I'm going to adjust the fence and put this side of the board faced down so that the blade is perpendicular with this pencil line. And then what we're going to do is adjust the fence until excuse me, and come in from this side. What we want is to touch the blade with the end of the tape, touch the blade, and then we want to adjust it until the inch mark is right on the edge of this side of the 4x4. So it's right next to the fence, touching the blade. Now we want to put this right on the side of a tooth and see where we're at. Right now, I'm reading 2 3/8 about. What we want is for the edge of this right here to read 1 inch. So now we'll adjust our fence. And now we are closer to 1 inch. Close enough, really. you want to be around an inch. If you're off by a 32nd or even a 16, it really doesn't matter because these are just legs for the box. It's not like you're building a fancy kitchen cabinet that everything has to be on point. But now that we're set up, let's make our next cut and move on to the next step. And just like that, we're at 1 inch. Here's that 90-degree angle. And now I'm gonna run all these through at least for one, for one box. But when I'm done with that, I'll show you how I can get this cross cut to travel to this cut. Like I said, the table saw won't take this off completely. What it does though is if you make one pilot cut with the table saw and one of these guides, then it'll make it a lot easier for you to come in there with a hacksaw or sawzall or buzz saw to finish the job. A lot of those saws will make pretty decent cuts, especially if you make a pilot cut with the table saw, because with the proper fence and the guides, the table saw can make a pretty accurate straight cut. But I'll show you what I mean as soon as I get done making the rest of these notches. So we'll be right back. Okay, now we're about ready to use this guy. This is just a guide if you're cutting super long boards this way, but you don't want this to happen. So on top of bracing it against the fence there, you put that there, and then you just hold it good. Use your hand like a clamp. That's what these are for. Because without it, you can still cut, but you better have good steady hands, otherwise it'll catch this and go or punch you in the face. Trust me, it's happened. So please be safe. Remember, wear these, and honestly wear ear protection. Jesus. Lord have mercy. Alright. So here's our first rip at 20 inches. So what we want to do is take the end of our tape, put it at where the cut started, and then mark 20 inches down here on the opposite end of our first rip. I'm going to do it on this side too, just in case I have to shift this around somewhat. Yeah. Now we want to loosen our fence. So right now I have it set to where 20 inches sits just on the other side of this blade. Lock our fence down. Get this set. Remember to use this guide, you'll need it. And now we're going to run this through, but before I run it all the way through, I'm going to run it just to where I think it barely touches this line. Then I'm going to pull it back just to make sure our blade height is still good, because some of these 4x4s are not all 100% the same exact dimensions. So let's find out. All right, so now we got our cross cut. Remember, this is a middle post, so this first rip goes all the way through. Same with this one, it goes all the way through. This is where, right about here, the box will just sit on top and it'll be glued and screwed all along this edge, which will be seen, this edge will be seen on the outside. It's just tongue and groove, you know. Alright, this part can take a little while, but I brought the blade down to about 1 inch. And what we're going to do next for the corners is I'm going to make a cut this way, but I'm going to try and not cut past anywhere here, past these first rips. You start small, run each board through, raise up the blade a little, run it through again, and so on and so forth until it's as close as you can get. If you go past this line, it's okay, just you don't want to cut into this part, the 1 inch that you're going to see in the final product. But after doing all that, then you can take your handsaw, hacksaw, buzz saw to finish buzzing what the circular table saw blade could not reach. And then you'll have your notched out support legs. But I'm going to run them through once. You'll see what I'm doing, at least I hope. Okay, we made our cross cut. You can see the first 2 cuts going with the board or with the grain, and now you got that cross cut that connects the two. Well, kinda. It's not perfect, but like I said, this is just a pilot cut to help guide the next tool. Alright, so now that we've made our pilot cut here with the table saw, we still have to cut a little more before this chunk of wood will blast off, and this will become a notched 4x4 corner post. This is now the time where this tool shines, if you got one. If you don't, you can use a hacksaw. If you know, handsaw, that'll do too. Because this isn't really meant to be a perfect straight cutting saw. But because there's a table saw cut already made, all you have to do is just brace it nice and even against that cut and then cut away at the rest. This saw really only works for me if you're trying to make a straight cut. It only works if you make a pilot cut on the table saw or the chop saw. So, and even this doesn't go all the way in necessarily, so sometimes you might have to take a spackle knife. This isn't really the best one I'd use personally, but it's the closest one I got. Anything this saw or this saw still can't get, just take a hammer and just all the way through until this feels like it can just be pried off a little bit. And if you break a little extra off on the inside, that's fine. Nobody's gonna see it, remember? The box is gonna sit inside. This entire 4x4 this part here is going to hug the box, so you won't see anything, so no worries there. But let's get started with this. All right. There's our notched 4x4. Yeah, each corner of the box will just sit right here, glued here, screwed. A little bit of glue on the bottom, and the weight will just sit on top. Should make for a sturdy planter box. It's the same procedure for these middle legs too. Actually, this might be even easier. Just like that. Let's see. Well, yeah, you can kind of see somewhat. Still gotta shave some of that off, but not too bad otherwise. Fairly straight cut. But I'm gonna do the rest of these and then we'll come right back with the next step. Stay tuned. So for the cedar box, I just went with some cedar fencing and I sanded each board and rounded each edge just to give it a nice look for staining, you know. After sanding each board, then I will glue and pin each part together just like a drawer box and stack 4 of them together to make the entire planter box as a whole. Okay, so now we're ready to put the whole thing together. We got our 4 corners. You can see where they'll sit not only on top but also be sandwiched between the corners. That's why we wanted to notch all those 4x4s so it would not only be held up by the 4 corners but by the entire 4x4 itself, because we don't need this collapsing anytime soon, you know? I'd like these boxes to at least make it to my retirement, which is a joke in and of itself. But I'm gonna do a quick time lapse of me putting this all together, and I hope you enjoy it. At this point, we'll set each corner posts apart from each other, about where you think you need it to be. Then I'll run my glue along the side walls as well as the bottom of the 4x4 where the box will sit. And it's very difficult the first time around anyway, positioning those corners exactly where you think you'll need them. I mean, if you use a tape measure, then obviously you wouldn't be going through as much struggle as I did, just because sometimes I like to work fast. It's not a good habit, especially with woodworking. I used to be, a lot more patient with it, and I still am, depending on what I'm doing, but sometimes I'll have a tendency to just be quick with it. But anyway, as you stack your frames, you want to glue them all together in the corners at least. And what I'm doing here is pushing them against the 4x4 as well as pushing down on the 4x4 to make sure it's sitting nice and flat. And right when I think the 4x4 is sitting good and flat against the ground, then I'll pin each board to the corner of the post, and then I'll move on to the next one and square that up and rinse and repeat. It's kind of a tedious process, but once you get the 4 corners exactly where they need to be and pin them down, that glue will eventually hold it together rock solid without the pins. But just for extra support, I like to also put a single screw in each board, each side of the board. So one on basically 2 on each side of the board, on the short end and the long end. You don't need more than that, and probably what I'm doing is overkill, but I like to be safe more than sorry. And now here I'm putting the middle posts on, which is really not that difficult to do compared to the corners. It's the same deal, you just glue the side wall and the bottom And now here's the box together. Just about halfway through, you can see how it sits on top of the 4x4. And now here I'd like to put a couple boards just to keep the bottom from moving on me, you know. Okay, so now we got the center cross supports, so there's not much movement down there. Near the end of the project, I'm going to put one right across the top and two, just why not? More stability. But now that we got that down there, we need to put in our bottom, and our bottom's going to be tapered. That way water will drain to the center with ease. And we're going to slant the bottom just barely. I'd say about an inch from the top of the first board, right about there. An inch down is where that's going to sit, and then it'll just angle to the bottom, right where the drain is. And I'll probably make a couple drains across, just smaller ones, but that will be our main drain. So for the bottom supports, I'm using the same 1-inch lumber that I used for the bottom center. And then I'll take on the bandsaw and give it a little notch so it'll sit right on that other 1x. You can kind of tell just looking at it right here. I measured 1 inch and I'm pinning it in temporarily with glue just to hold it in place so I can come back with the screws. It's these are 5/8 thick boards of cedar, so you got to be careful not to put too long of brads and not too long of screws. But all in all, if you put in a good amount of glue in there, it's going to hold it really, really good. And now here I come with the screw gun to fasten the box in completely. Like I said, the nails are just to hold it in place while the glue dries, but the screws are there just for extra insurance, you know, because you can never be too cautious, especially with something like this. I don't need the weight of the soil to really screw me up. But after putting my frame in on the bottom, I run my glue and put in my bottom cedar planks. And then I'll take a mini crowbar and just space them out a little bit just to give them room to breathe, because those are also going to be my other drains, while the main drain will be in the center. Make sure you pin them down. You don't have to screw those boards down because the weight of the soil will do all the work there. But check that out. Doesn't that look sick? Looks really nice against those pressure treated 4x4s too. Unfortunately, from this point on, I completely forgot to record the final assembly of it on the top, as you can see. But you get the general idea. Alright, there's the video. Once again, I apologize for not recording every single step of the project. Part of it was me forgetting to hit the record button, and the other half was me forgetting to set up the camera completely, because like I said, when I get into go-go or work mode, I'm not thinking about anything else except getting the project done. But basically, to go over it once again, after I assembled these boxes, I put a cap on the top so that you don't see the, get out of here, mosquito, so you don't see the end grain of the 4x4s, you know, and it makes it look nice. And I also went over this with some conditioner called Flood. It's called Flood, but it's basically like a deck stain or deck oil. It soaks down to the core and keeps it protected for quite a long time. It's good for UV protection and mold, but it's only so good for as long as you keep up on it, you know. If I was to recoat these once a year, I could probably make the finish last, I don't know, 5 to 10 years before I have to really sand it down and then recoat it again. But if I recoat this once a year, I shouldn't have to do any sanding. I should just go right over it. It's like Sunfrog. Has anybody ever used Sunfrog? It's an older deck conditioner for sure, but just like this, it soaks deep inside the grain, unlike a stain where it usually just soaks on the surface. But it's very good stuff, and I like how they turned out. Let's see, we got onions on one, then we got pumpkin, peas, onions, potatoes, corn, sugar peas, a little bit of garlic. Actually, the taters aren't going to be in these. For the taters, I'm just going to stack a bunch of tires on the far end and put some good soil in there. And then as the taters expand, I'll add another tire and some more soil. Then we should have plenty of damn taters, alright. But this will be really fun on top of the gardening I already do. Because really complements the deck, you know, and it's nice. It works like a fence, so nobody will fall off. Other than that, though, that's pretty much the whole video. I hope you enjoyed this little tutorial of mine, and if you'd like to see more tutorials on how I like to build stuff, please comment down below. I know many of you have asked for a little tutorial on how I build my banjos, and I know I haven't delivered on that very well, but that'll be my next mission. As far as tutorial vids, that's next on the list. Now that I'm all done dealing with my spirituality bullshit. And another thing I've been dealing with is getting off the nicotine, because that's been really bad. The last 3 weeks I'm not gonna lie, it's been hell. But I'm finally past the worst of it, and I feel like a new man. And if anybody else is struggling with addictions like that, just know you can do it. If I can quit, so can you. Everybody's different. But I'll tell you what, the withdrawals hit everybody just about the same. It sucks. It really sucks. Sometimes you might blurt things out that you just don't know where they came from, or how did that come out of me, you know? It's like, wow, was that really me that just said that? There's been a whole lot of that going on. Just whenever I'm in the shop and say I miscut something, or I drop something, or I lose something, then I just kind of have a little outburst to myself, like, what the, you know. It's been rough. But now that I'm past that, I'm feeling so much better. The other thing that happened is my phone went to crap, so I didn't have a phone for a solid 14 days. And I'm not gonna lie, part of me enjoyed that 14 days of no phone. Just, it's all distraction, you know? Everything going on in the world, social media, these smartphones that go dinging off every 10 seconds telling you how screwed up the world is. It's just distracting, so I'm so happy I don't have to deal with that anymore, because I have a flip phone. You guys remember the flip phones? Or at least those of you that are my age or older? Them phones are the shit. I remember when I first got mine in junior high, I was so happy. For the longest time, too, I hung on to that phone, because everyone else around me was like, get a smartphone, get a smartphone. Well, finally I got a smartphone, and 17 years later, I'm so thankful to be rid of that damn thing. Nothing but a pain in my ass, and too smart for its own good. You can't beat the good old flip phone. I mean, you can, but at least the flip phone doesn't try to beat you up, you know, with a lot of dumb shit on social media, so... Next banjo video, I'll show you all what my flip phone looks like. It's pretty legit, actually, so... And maybe it'll make you all want to give up the smartphone, too, because although that decision's definitely not for everybody, I have to tell you, I feel so much better having my phone go off once every couple hours versus every 10 minutes because somebody called or texted, because I don't get notifications. There's no Facebook, no Instagram, no stupid TikTok, none of that stuff. Although the only thing I really will miss is having Facebook Marketplace in my pocket, because there's so much good stuff on that app that people are selling or just getting rid of. But as long as you got a PC, you can still check that stuff, which is nice, because you get your 10 minutes, maybe 20 or 30 minutes fill of social media, and then you're done. That's your fill for the day, and you don't need any more. And I can't lie, it's been great. Really awesome. Just checking on the PC and then turning it off and just not having to see it for the rest of the day unless I really want to, you know? Anyway, enough of my useless banter. You all have a good one, and I'll see you on the next banjo video. Please like and subscribe. You're all awesome. Peace out.